like to know if she could move her presentation up, and I would like to have it come after the Johnny Ellis legacy if Harry Need is going to be here this evening. And we won't be having a presentation from Ruth Ann Jennings as she's out of town. And Bradley Coy cannot make it this week because the traffic study is not yet completed. So he wants to do that at the next meeting. Are there any other changes or additions to the agenda? Okay. All in favor of the changes? Aye. The ayes have it. Okay. The minutes have been published and they've been on the website for about 10 days or 2 weeks. Are there any changes to the minutes of the meeting of January 27th? Seeing none, can I get a vote of approval on that?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Ayes have it. So it looks like Harry Need is not here. So we're gonna, and it looks like Sheila is not. Yes, Tom?
Harry had asked me to say a few words, so maybe that's what.
Please go ahead.
Well, just he's coming online to talk about, when he comes on, he'll be on to talk about something he wants to do in remembrance of my predecessor and friend Johnny Ellis. And I just wanted to say a few words about Johnny. And I know many of you had direct or personal contact with Johnny and knew him well. I've known him since 1982. I met him in the spring of 1982, just after he'd gotten back from college. But I just wanted you to know that, Johnny had done a lot for our district, not, in 30 years of service, not just 32 years if you count the 2 years he worked for Representative Clarkson before he was elected to replace Representative Clarkson. He really did build a legacy around really helping those who were not listened to. And many of our constituents, many of the people who live in our district fit right into that pattern. And Johnny was a champion for the disabled. He was a champion for the elderly. He was a champion for the poor. He was a champion for our minority community. He was a champion for our LGBTQ community. He really was a person for our time and a person who really anticipated some of the battles we'd be fighting today. And I know that all of you may feel the loss as I do if you knew him. And if you didn't know him, you should have. He's a great guy. And I just really wanted to say a few words in memory of him and in memory of his passing. And he's my age, he's a guy that was my contemporary. And so I'll miss him. And I just wanted to say those few words. And Harry had asked me to put those words out there for y'all. So thank you for the time, John.
Thank you, Senator Begich. Well, I guess we can proceed. Is anyone from the legislature here this evening? Excuse me, Senator, go ahead.
I am. I'll give you my legislative report. Mercedes Colbert's online as well. I guess, very brief report, John, this time. Two issues really to focus on: the legislative activity and then just what happened with reapportionment. With the legislative activity, we're in the midst of what we call the doldrums. It's almost like there's this incredible activity in January and then nothing for the first, for the middle of the February time, and then it kicks up again with the March oil forecasts. I must tell you, the blood money of the Ukrainian war has kicked the price of oil up to around $98 to $100 a barrel, which has perversely created a cushion of revenue in the state. That's what's called unobligated revenue. What that means is that the ability to support a budget that does include some of the capital projects we've talked about is going to go forward. My caucus will be working very closely, as I've mentioned before, with the Senate majority in writing the operating and capital budgets. Also, completing the allocation of the American Recovery Act money, the ARPA money, There's 450 million still to allocate for that. My caucus will participate in the allocation of that. And then finally, in the money that'll be coming in from the federal government, identifying a plan or a long-term plan for how that money will be expended. So all of those things I'll be involved in. I'll keep you informed as those processes go on. I do have my essential workers bills in its last committee of referral in the House. If it passes, that would provide free tuition for essential workers who had to work during the pandemic, or those who either had their hours reduced or lost their jobs during the pandemic. There's some certain conditions, but if they want to move to improve their life, they'll have an opportunity to do so. It passed the Senate, it just needs to pass the House. I believe the governor will allow it to become law. And we continue to work on the education bills, and we continue to work on a number of policy issues on the side, including still revenue and other elements of a fiscal plan, because the best time to do a fiscal plan is when you don't have a deficit, but when you actually have some resources. So I'm going to set that aside. And you can ask me questions on that in a minute, but just really quickly on reapportionment. 2 lawsuits were successful of the 5 that were filed. One of those was for the limited city of Skagway wanting to be connected to a House district that's the south part of Juneau, or downtown Juneau, rather than the north part of Juneau. The judge ruled that public opinion was valuable, and public opinion had testified for that, so that change will occur, but it won't change anything else in the map. The other thing that changed was the judge ruled hands down that the board, using secrecy and other elements, violated the Equal Protection Clause of the state constitution in providing extra representation to Eagle River at the expense of the rest of Anchorage. So they want to see the reconstituted Muldoon Senate District, a reconstituted Muldoon Senate District, and consequently an Eagle River Senate District. That will have ramifications for our Senate District as well, because in that repairing, they're going to have to decide which House districts go with each other. But it doesn't change the underlying House map. So our House map stands right now anyway, with both Representative Fields and Representative Drummond now in the House district, this House district with South Edition, and I in the Senate district. So that's what it looks like right now. And April 1st, the Supreme Court will make its final ruling in that case. I've asked them to consider some other issues that were brought up in the judge's findings. The judge's decision was 170 some pages long. It was quite detailed and really did break new ground. It's extraordinarily well done, and actually bodes well for future reapportionment. I tried to do that as fast as I could, John. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Does anyone have questions for Senator Begich?
I think Thomas does.
Yeah, thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Senator. Just a quick question. Is the ruling final?
Yes and no. It's final as far as the Superior Court goes. The Supreme Court could reject it. The board appealed the ruling to the Supreme Court, and so did a couple of the other plaintiffs. Matsu lost its case, it appealed. Valdez lost its case, it appealed. Skagway did not appeal because they won their case, and the plaintiffs in the case that I was supporting did not appeal because they won their case as well. So the board has appealed, but I got to tell you, I've talked to the attorneys, I've talked to others about it. I think the decision's going to stand, so I believe it will stand. I will give a full report to you, though. I doubt they'll decide by the time of our next meeting in March, but we will know by April for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So any questions on the legislative front? I see Tristan's online for Zach.
Go ahead, Tristan.
Hi, folks, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry, I was a little bit late here. Similar to what Senator Begich has probably briefed you about, we are in the middle of our subcommittee budget process. So we're actually in the process of closing things out. We're in a pretty good place. So Representative Fields is on, I think, about 5 different subcommittees, and some of the subcommittees he's on, such as the Health and Social Services Committee, we're offering amendments to increase the funding for behavioral health providers in the state. Right now, under COVID, a lot of providers had to really especially for those people who are doing senior citizens and those who may have trouble, or who might normally need congregant care. They shifted to things like Meals on Wheels, transportation, more chores, like things that can be helped in their own homes where they're a little bit safer. So they actually increased the number of residents served. And so we are offering an amendment to try to make sure that they don't fall off a fiscal cliff, so to speak, when the kind of COVID state of emergency winds down. And so we're going to try to make sure that these seniors continue to get services. So we're working on a couple of amendments with that. We're working really close with the behavioral health providers, who are the main community organizations across the state that help do that. We're also offering some amendments in the Department of Labor Workforce Development Subcommittee, where Rep. Fields' background is in labor. And so historically, we've seen a shortage or a gradual reduction in positions like wage and hour inspectors to make sure that employers are not committing wage theft. The same thing for employees. And then, yeah, so that's the subcommittee process. We are also working on a number of bills. We have a couple in the Senate. One is the Alaska Able Act, which is in the Senate Labor and Commerce Committee. It's an update to legislation passed in 2016 that allows people with disabilities to have more financial security independence, so they don't get handicapped, or so to speak, or excuse me, punished by federal regulations regarding programs they're on. So it's kind of similar to the EFD Hold Harmless program the state operates. And then we also have bills for apprenticeship that is in Senate Education to improve the links between high school, the workforce, and the different trades. That's going to be a huge issue the state faces going forward. You all know and are pretty well familiar, I think, with the labor crisis we have right now in terms of our workforce. It's going to get more urgent as the state tries to take the billions of dollars that are coming in different federal programs and try to put those towards shovel-ready projects. And so that's a thing that he's very excited about and very interested in, and trying to position the state to be a little bit better received for those federal funds. And then we have a child care collective bargaining bill that is in House Finance that we're really excited about. It allows child care workers to collectively bargain with the state, which would be very exciting because it's a way to cut through what is currently a failed market. I think most people who have kids in the state are familiar with how hard it is to find good providers and how much it costs. Then also there would let workers take advantage of things like a living wage, healthcare, and it was also something that allows employers to opt in. So a small business all of a sudden might be able to tap into a multi-billion-dollar trust fund that gives their workers a lot of, but also helps them recruit and retain those workers who are usually women and who are usually, trying to pay off lots of different types of school debt. So that's a bill that we're really excited about. And we also have a online raffle bill that would take some of the governor's emergency orders and make them permanent. And so that is a bill we're pretty excited about. The Excel Alaska and the Downtown Community Council both have been doing a lot of good work with the Rubber Duck Derby in the spring. And so that was something that they were able to put a lot of good ticket sales out in just by an online website. So this bill would make that permanent. So there's a lot more I'm sure I'm missing, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Tristan? Okay, seeing none. Hi, Sheila. I've moved you up in the hierarchy, so you can go ahead with your report on the neighborhood plan. You're on mute, Sheila. Sheila.
Thank you for adjusting the agenda for me. I've got a family birthday party behind me. I just wanted to give you an update in terms of where we are right now. Basically, we started out, we've got a pretty good outline for how we're going to put the plan together. And that outline makes sure that we really look at all the foundational items that have been done and actions that have been done. And what I wanted to really describe, I wanted to explain that in a way, this plan is like a story. It's a story of what we've done. So we are just in a chronological way going to march through the events that have occurred and the actions that have occurred in terms of making the plan and or creating these specific outcomes. And as we march through it, we really have to explain how we did the outreach, how many people came, what the expectation was of the event, what was actually done in the event, and then what the outcomes of the events are. And so it's just basically we're building a story that repeats over and over and over again what we did, how we did it, and what we came out with. And I think that we're not really missing anything. There are a few places as we move forward that I think that we're going to want to talk about, maybe becoming a little bit more specific about certain things, or a little bit more demanding, so that we clarify exactly what we want in terms of the guidelines and really the objectives of the plan. But it's going well. It's not going to be enormously difficult, I think, to do this. It's just a matter of organization, like I said last time. And so I think one of the things you should feel good about is that everything that I've looked at has been done well. Everything, there's no big gaps that I see in terms of protocols or the ways that we're supposed to be building a plan. So it's just a matter of working through it, making sure the content's in the right place and that it's organized nicely. And I think there will not be a problem really about public engagement, because there's plenty of documentation of public engagement. So are there any questions?
Yeah, Sheila, I do. Do you have any estimate or a timeline and when you think this will be completed?
Well, I think John gave we talked, when he talked to me, we talked about having it done by spring, right? I mean, that's the goal. I'm hoping, and in some ways, maybe it'll go faster than that, but I don't want to promise it faster than that, because there's areas where we really have to kind of revise the introduction. There's a variety, there's work to do. And I think we talked about having it done by May. I'm hoping that we will have it done sooner than that, but I don't want to promise it any sooner than that until we get into, doing the writing and seeing what it takes. Most of the work, I believe, is well documented. So I'm hoping that it goes faster than that.
Okay, great. Look forward to seeing it.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you for doing it.
Sorry I have to run away again. Thank you. See you next month.
Harry, I see that you're here now.
I'll watch. I'm going to stay for this.
Harry, would you
Hi
have
there.
time now? Hi. Would you like to take a little time and talk about the legacy of Johnny Ellis for us?
Sure, but having read Senator Begich's remarks regarding Johnny Ellis, it occurred to me that there's so many people on this call, Senator Begich included, that knew him much better than I, and so I asked Tom to make some remarks regarding Senator Ellis, and as he's unmuting and getting ready for that, I also want to let you guys know that what I'd like to do is make a motion to ask the the executive body, to request a naming commission from the from the municipality. I think that there's a couple other neighborhoods that may be interested in creating some lasting legacy regarding his name, and finding some municipal infrastructure that we could remember him with. So I will be making that motion following Tom's remarks, but I just wanted to yield to Senator for this.
You'll be making that motion sooner than you think because I made the remarks already, Harry.
Okay,
And so they've been made. So the motion is coming back to you. And
great.
again, just I miss my friend, and I know that others here do, and I'm glad that I was able to make a few comments earlier about it.
Thank you. And I apologize for my tardiness. I have a family just flew in, so just getting them settled downstairs right now. But so I guess what I'd like to do is move that this body authorizes John to communicate on behalf of the South Addition Community Council to the municipal administration, requesting a naming commission.
I second that motion.
All in favor? The ayes have it. Looks like it's unanimous.
Thank you. And I'll be working with some of the other neighborhoods community councils to coordinate that, and we'll work with Christopher and the municipality to see that through.
Thank you, Harry. Is there anyone from the mayor's office here this evening? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone from the police department? Is there anyone from the fire department? Is there anyone from the school board? So I do not have a report. So Daniel, you have the floor.
I have a quick report. I got to go to Juneau. I was there just for 2 days, so today and yesterday, and I had a fantastic time meeting in person with some people I only get to see on Zoom. So I met Mercedes in person and Tristan, and just really appreciate the opportunity to talk with Senator Begich and Rep. Fields, and I really appreciate everything that they're doing for Alaska, all the hard work they do, that their staffs do, and what they're doing for our community. And I think especially with all the crazy stuff that we're seeing happening right now with Russia and Ukraine, I'm just, I don't know, especially thankful for democracy and local democracy and neighborliness, and the fact that we can come together on a Thursday night and share what's important to us as neighbors. So yeah, that's my report.
Thank you, Daniel. Is Kathleen Hahn here?
I believe she said she wouldn't be able to attend.
Okay. So we now have a presentation by Anna Boson on the South Addition Complete Streets Project. Is Anna here? There she is. Go ahead, Anna, please.
Great. Well, thank you very much for including me on this agenda. I want to first do a shout out. Last time we met a month ago for the community council, the transportation subcommittee was formed, and we've been busy. I want to shout out to Martin and Tomash and Patrice, and of course Cheryl's here, and Sheila. Every one of us, divided and conquered on some time-sensitive remarks to our representatives, and then also, worked hard on some submittals for planning documents for AMATs. So first wanted to make a shout out to them. So I'm going to give an overall presentation on just to give some of the highlights on complete streets, what they are. And the timing of this is such that we submitted several projects that have that term in it for the description of upcoming transportation related projects around the city. You're going to hear about it from other community councils and downtown districts, and it's kind of been in the works across the country. And now we have this new infrastructure bill. Funding is important, and everybody's making a grab for it. So now's our chance to really get up to speed on the new ways of re-envisioning transportation in communities. So I'm going to share my screen. I just have 3 pages. I don't want to make everybody go to sleep. All right, and to give you guys some background, I've only been a South Addition resident for 2 years now, just before the pandemic. I live next door to Fran, and always do my shout out for Fran. And anyway, so I have a young daughter with me here, and otherwise, though, I've been an Anchorage resident for almost 15 years. And I used to live in Spenard area and owned a house there. And I've been working for the DOT as a civil engineer for 14 years. And before that, I worked survey company. And before that, I worked for a municipality in California for 4 years. So I really cut my teeth on community design and neighborhood design. And so, all right. So where I'm coming from on this presentation is to take some key concepts on complete streets so that you don't get bogged down into the minutia of engineering terms or planning terms, but really the concept is, and in this document, I'll send it to John. He can share it with whoever on the website or email list or whatever, but this link here is from the US DOT. So I'm going to start kind of big government and what they kind of provide as guidance for it. And then I'll work my way down into the city and how it all is tied together. Sorry, sweetie.
Can I give Sash a phone?
No, not right now.
Okay.
So complete streets are streets designed and operated to enable safe use and support of mobility for all users. So all ages, all abilities. It's an equitable way of sharing the right of way and really re-envisioning optimal use of that right of way for all users. And then those policies on complete streets and what it is for, let's say, Alaska or Anchorage, each governing body needs to decide how that is going to look for meeting their goals of their of their plans. So we do have US DOT has guidelines on it, and FHWA has some guidelines, and I have a list of sources down at the bottom of this. The city of Anchorage has complete streets guidelines. So we do have that kind of layered background here in Alaska, and so that's good. So some of the examples of what is that shared space for? It's about moving people. It's not about moving cars, and it's not about dividing up the space. Like, okay, you get a chunk here. Fine, we gave in and gave to you bicyclists, who are advocating. Here's your bikeway or whatever. Stop bothering us. It's really about making sure that it's a safe space for all users, because we are all at some point, pedestrians. 80% of the population will at some point be disabled. We have vulnerable users, young children, elderly, people with varying abilities. So those spaces actually have shared benefits that are across mobilities. So just because there's a bicycle lane that might be there, that bicycle lane also provides a buffer between, cars and, the walkway. So if there's an errant vehicle, you still have that extra space. That bike lane, provides visual cues and ability for drivers to see pedestrians. So there's just a lot more to it than just a bike lane that's solely for the bicyclists. And there's other examples like that where there's this overlap. So I'm not going to go into every single mode, but I'm not going to do that right now, sweetie. This is an example of just kind of a before and after. There's varying ways that you can reimagine that right of way. And why would we want to do that? Well, we obviously have had the last couple of years time to think about space and thinking about separation, and then also thinking about health and complete streets and redistributing that right of way in an equitable fashion really touches on all of those things that we've been pondering as a nation, as a state, and as a city. So you can see how there's a benefit across advocacy, topics, whether it's equity, whether it's economics, whether it's health, all those things. All right, so I just took a screenshot from AMATS, and as a quick shout out to how do we get there for our community council. Well, we just put in several AMATs, which is the planning organization, because the Anchorage is more than 50,000 residents. There's only 2 metropolitan planning organizations in the state. Fairbanks is the other one. Most likely the Matsu will become one because of the recent census, but right now we have 2. And that's really the way that we get access to that federal funding. So I just wanted to take a quick highlight for that. And I also provided a link for the Complete Streets policy, and I'll open that up in a second. And so in that Complete Streets, I took this quote from there: consider not only the presence of a facility, but also the level of comfort and safety. And that is important too, because we sometimes get challenged when we're asking for more space for pedestrians or more space for bicyclists. Well, there's no bicyclists on this road. There's no pedestrians. Like, there's no need, or we don't have any crashes or accidents there. Why should we invest in that right of way? To take away from the driver, for instance, or and really it's about you build it and they will come. Who wants to take their children on a journey with a child that's maybe just learning how to ride their bicycle? If there's no safe facility there, if it's not pleasurable, if they're going to be constantly white knuckling it and having to navigate tons of driveways, parking lots, cars backing up onto sidewalks, fast moving traffic in one direction, maybe lots of turning cars that are traveling at high speeds. That's just obviously not a comfort level, but studies have shown once you build a facility that actually accommodates more users, then the users spread is much more diverse. So you're really, for creating a facility that then is open to other users. And it also provides a better economic benefit for the adjacent properties as well. So enough about some of the reasons behind it. These resources here that are linked in here, these are also in the Anchorage, the AMATS Complete Streets policy. So these are not unknown to Anchorage, or they actually cite several of these very well-used national documents that they use to create their policy. So okay, now that we've decided that complete streets are the answer for maybe South Edition and even other parts of Anchorage, how do we as residents make sure that when these decisions and projects are being developed or considered for funding, how do we make sure that they get built the right way, or that they are going to get the attention they deserve during design or during planning? So what does advocate mean? And I know Cheryl's going to talk maybe for a minute or two about that after this, but we really do need, it's not just about submitting the application on the tip and walking away. We all know this, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Right now we're seeing all across the country, people are really getting more engaged on the local level. And I think this is a way that if you're looking for an avenue to advocate transportation, this has a direct benefit to our economy for construction. It's obviously a direct benefit for our transportation environment, but our climate action plan. There's just, if any of those topics are of interest to you, you have a home here to advocate for complete streets and for the projects within Anchorage. And I'm making a plea, not just for South Edition, but the complete streets only work if they get you from A to B. So we really need to support our neighbors in other community councils on their complete streets project submissions. We need to show up at public meetings and make comments and challenge the design to ensure that elements that are in a complete street are present and that there's not shortcuts there to maintain the status quo, because that is the easy thing to do a lot of times when you're trying to implement new ideas or concepts. And that, you also show your solidarity with other existing nonprofits. There's Bike Anchorage, there's, other nonprofits around Alaska, and then even, of course, on the national level. So all these groups could use your support. And so that's my pitch there. Other things that you can do, of course, is comment on design, comment at assembly meetings, comment, to the DOT or to the city design group. And I do have down here a link for contact information for the city planning department. And, what do we do in the meantime? If we put in a TIP project nomination today, most likely the earliest we will see, anything happen is 4 to 5 years from now. And that's just the nature of the wheels of government, and funding are slow. So we don't have to settle for substandard facilities across Anchorage until, construction is funded. We have an obligation, because the city has received federal funds in the past. Just receiving $1 makes them required to comply with access, equal access to facilities. The DOT is on the hook to maintain any facilities where FHWA paid for them. And, we all know that FHWA, the federal funding partner for the highway administration, is, we receive, 90% of our capital projects are federally funded. So they are on the hook to maintain those. And what does maintenance mean? Maintenance means plowing sidewalks. Maintenance means clearing, storm drains, and, making sure that lights are on, and making sure that traffic signals, that the PED buttons are working, that we have, clear areas to turn when the snow gets piled, that you can actually see and make a safe turn. So, those are the squeaky wheel will get the message across. and take pictures and send them. I mean, nobody can argue with a picture. There was one that somebody mentioned last month of a video of somebody in a wheelchair traveling, down a fast arterial road because there was no sidewalk there for that person to go towards or go down towards wherever they were going. So the point is, they want, resources will always go towards, the status quo until, we make a fuss. And signs, striping, lights, all of those things need to be maintained year round. And, last but not least, I'm almost done out of time. I do want to also, point out anytime the pavement is ripped up and a paver shows up to lay down new asphalt, the adjacent access ramps need to be brought up to current standards. And, fortunately, I know a lot about ADA compliance because of past work, but it's really not that hard to see whether that is being done or not. When you see brand new pavement, there should be some really nice new access ramps there. And that's important because we should be in compliance for those. And anyway, those are basic things that have been around for a long time. There was a Department of Justice edict that came out in 2013 that put all cities and DOTs on notice that if they were not in compliance, they were going to be potentially sued. And it has happened around the country. And so it's very much a real threat. Now, do we want to have, have it come to a lawsuit situation? No, we want them to do the right thing. So anyway, I'm just putting, when you see a paver out there, there should be some brand new access ramps right next to it. If there are access ramps and sidewalk in that area. If it's, a rural highway, obviously we're not going to put them out, but here in Anchorage, we should be seeing some new access ramps. Okay, this is my last photo, an example of complete streets elements and ADA, American Disabilities Act, elements here. We're able to serve all sorts of users, I guess, and that's really the takeaway. So with that, I'm gonna stop my presentation. If anybody has questions, I can also pull up. I have the AMAT's Complete Streets. There's not a single picture available on it. So it's not that interesting to look at, but.
Does anyone have any questions for Anna? Yes, Martin. Martin, you're muted.
Oh, thank you for that too, John. Anna, thank you for all of this. I really appreciate it. And I guess I'm going to state the obvious, and it's snow on the sidewalks, snow in the bike lanes. Do you have tactics for addressing that? And that's done at both the state. I believe snow clearing in Anchorage is done both by the state and the municipality. Thank you.
Yeah, very good point. Who do you call when you see it? So it's a patchwork of agreements between the municipality and the DOT related to sidewalks, because as you can imagine, the DOT is not that interested, or not interested, but they don't have the equipment in general to do the sidewalks. And of course, the city has the transit facilities. So there is some coordination to plow the streets first and then get the sidewalks, so that we're not replowing over the sidewalks over again. That happens. It's been happening, it's hit or miss each winter, it seems like. But I would say that if the road is over, more than 2 lanes wide, it's kind of like a rule of thumb, more than 2 lanes wide, more than, 35 miles an hour, it's most likely a DOT road. So I would always start with that, but they'll correct you quickly. If it's not that, they will tell you to go to the other. So I have, hold on a second. Okay, hold on. So there's there's just two numbers, essentially. You call one or you call the other. And, you can always ask nicely first, share a photo, but ultimately, you have to elevate it many times. And I'll be honest, I've had to elevate my own when I lived in Spenard. I continue to advocate for Spenard Road, even though I don't live there anymore, and it's taken years. So.
Anna, I have a question. There are efforts to reduce on-site parking requirements through changes in Title 21. And by reducing the on-site parking requirements, there will be more vehicles parking in the streets. Does the complete street philosophy address on parking in the streets?
Yes and no. Sorry, hold on a second, sweetie. I'm not done yet. The complete streets will address it on a case-by-case basis, and it really depends on whether that's a local street, a collector street, what the classification is of the roadway. Of course, the width of the right-of-way, and you can see that the city is attempting to address it in high density parking situations like 10th Avenue. That's a good example of a corridor that has addressed parking that's safe with bicyclists, with pedestrians, and that's the reverse in angled parking. And yeah, cars are probably not going to like it, but that's the city making a choice to provide a facility that's maybe more in line for safety and for non-motorized users.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Anna? Go ahead, Martin.
Thank you. I just typed that one into the chat. We got a lot of people parking on or across sidewalks, which I assume is not legal. How do we encourage people to not do that? Because especially in the winter, when you step off the sidewalk and you're walking around the car in the dark, it's not so good.
So it's about having people park not on the sidewalk. So there's no rule. I mean, there was a recent thing in the assembly about rolled curbs, and they wanted to modify the code for that. And I sent a strongly worded letter to the assembly because rolled curbs are exactly that, an invitation to take over sidewalk space from other users. And it's a cheap tactic to support large vehicles having access, during construction, essentially. Sometimes it's used for emergency vehicles over medians, but that's a rarity in itself. So anyway, that's one thing, is to never have rolled curbs in your community if you can help it. And I can show you tons of pictures of very sad situations in Fairview where they have chosen 30 years ago to put rolled curbs in, and how that has changed the streetscape. So in terms of not parking on the sidewalk in the wintertime, I think you having your own planter or something that you put, kind of near there, you could try to do something like that. It's a public space, you can call the right-of-way, people to come out and do enforcement. I would kind of take it with a grain of salt if you want to take that up as the fight. I bet it would be, a handful of times maybe, but you might not get a lot, and maybe just talk to the person, who's doing it. A lot of times when I worked for the city and even in the traffic section here at DOT, a lot of the times that you see repeat issues in your neighborhood are really your neighbors, So we got to really be good neighbors, just like we're not putting our snow into the street, we just need to be good neighbors about it. Anyway, that's that issue. I know it's not perfect answer for you, Martin.
Deborah Hanson, do you have a question?
Well, just back on the people parking on the sidewalks. What it is in our neighborhood, there are 10 renters, and we've spoken to the owners where the owner has told the renters to park across the driveway, which totally blocks the sidewalk. And we've talked to the owner of this particular house several times, and he doesn't really care. And we don't want to have some renter get ticketed. It doesn't seem fair.
Right.
So we've left notes on cars. I mean, we have a lot of strollers in our neighborhood, and it's not fair for them to have to divert into the street.
No,
and
you're
it's the same houses, so it's not like this is a surprise. It's been going on in one case for over 10 years.
I mean, at some point, I would, code enforcement should be notify the owners of the place. In Spenard, this happened a ton where I would, was advocating for these sidewalk improvements along Spenard, and then businesses are parking all over the sidewalks year round there. And I mean, it's one thing here in a neighborhood where people are going 15 miles an hour, but on Spenard, you're sending a kid off into a street, and they can't see around a car, and they're trying to navigate that. So it was a real, safety concern in that regard. So especially if you see that kind of stuff in a safety concern, situation, or where somebody, you've seen, people with disabilities in that neighborhood trying to navigate something, that's a real problem.
Daniel? You're muted. Daniel.
There we go, unmute. With complete streets, I think there are strategies. I learned a term recently. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Bollards,
yeah.
Or different things you can do to separate traffic from protected bike lanes or sidewalks.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of momentum right now for reimagining our multimodal transportation or our infrastructure. And I recently went to a downtown community council, and they did a presentation on street revitalization. And I think there is opportunity to partner with other community councils and really bring this issue to the surface. And maybe that's something that the transportation committee can really help lead on. And I also Cheryl had asked if she could, at the end of your presentation, give a couple remarks, if it's okay with you, John, and maybe solicit some volunteers.
Sure. Cheryl, go ahead.
Well, I'm here, but are there any other questions before this?
I don't see any.
Okie doke. Well, thank you very much. Sorry, to Anna for joining us in this quest, and her expertise is just invaluable. And frankly, I was surprised it was only been a month since we started this, because the group has done a lot of work, and it's a great group that we have on this little committee. At this point, we're in the outreach section. As Anna says, we need to have our neighbors think about this and begin to hopefully support it and get the word out to people in the neighborhood and to our elected officials, like the schools. Sheila mentioned, make sure you contact Central and Chugach and Inlet View and Denali, because they will be supporting safety for their kids. So what we need at this point, frankly, we need some illustrations that show how ACINL can be better places. 15th Avenue, what do we need redesigned on these streets? And then so people can imagine why they would support spending dollars to make these complete streets. So, in the past, Elise Huggins has helped us with illustrations, and I haven't had contact with her for a long while, but I know we've got some good illustrators out there. That's one thing we need. We need folks to come in and brainstorm a strategy for outreach and then to follow through. I'm looking forward, as I said, to illustrations and flyers at a minimum. And we need more help. It's a great committee. We've got great minds, but we need more people. So I'm looking for more volunteers.
Thank you, Cheryl. The next person on the agenda is, and thank you very much.
John, we got to give people time to say, okay, I'll help.
Please contact Cheryl Richardson with all your free time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you again, Anna. The next person on our agenda is Daniel McKenna Foster from the Planning Department on updates to R4 zoning mixed use areas. Good evening, Daniel.
Good evening. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Daniel McKenna Foster. I'm the long range planner for the municipality. And I just talking briefly tonight about the R4A zone, which is a sort of a niche zone created a few years ago, but hasn't gotten much use. So we've gone back to look at how to make it a little more attractive for adult development. So if I could, I'll just share my screen here. Let's see on the full screen. Can everybody see this? So R4A is it's the highest capacity mixed use zone. Basically, it's sort of the residential equivalent of B3 if you are familiar with a lot of the zones. So this project, it's not rezoning any property. We're not saying this property will now be eligible for these types of activities. It's just extending what's allowed in a zone that already exists. And right now there are only about 3 acres of land zoned R4A in the municipality. So that kind of tells you how popular or unpopular it is. So comp plan support, why are we doing this? 2 of the main things are to remove barriers to desired infill development and incorporate flexibility, and promote development of the Main Street transit-oriented mixed-use corridors that help meet the city's need for retail, service, jobs, et cetera. It's kind of paraphrasing those. So the purpose of this zone is to kind of get more housing in central areas, of which there's a tiny little piece of South Addition, which is eligible, and sort of build that up and mix that residential and commercial. So in terms of where it's allowed, there are only a few land use designations on the land use map where it's allowed. Those are urban residential high, city center with some exceptions, and Main Street corridor. So actually downtown is city center in the future land use plan, but because there's a downtown plan going on, it's kind of doing its own thing. So that kind of takes precedence over this. So when we're talking about R4A, this is kind of what people were thinking about when they created this zone. So this is before my time, and this is what I've been told, but and these are just examples. So there are many things to pick apart about these. Oh, the right of way there is different, or the trees are different. But really the emphasis is this is the building type that people were imagining. This, for those of you not familiar, this is referred to as the 5/1 or the 6/1. It's basically a type of construction that has a concrete first floor and then 5 stories of wood on the top. And this has been popular in the last 10, 15 years because a change in the building code years ago allowed them to do this, which meant that you could all of a sudden build apartments in a much more economical way. So these are all over the country, especially in cities, and a lot of places where the housing need is, it's been met by these. Here's another example from Minneapolis, and here's one from Corvallis. I used to work in Corvallis, so I brought this example as well. So what are the changes we're proposing? I'll go over these quickly. We're updating and simplifying the mixed-use design standards and increasing the floor to area ratio. And that's basically how much of the lot the building can cover, more or less, and how high it can go. We're changing the height allowances. So we're changing the by right height to 60 feet. Before it was 45 feet in some cases, but up to 70 feet in some cases. So we're simplifying it, saying up to 60 feet. And if you want to go higher, then you have to step back to preserve that solar access. We're doing some shadowing kind of studies right now to see if that's even effective. So we're still working on that. Simplifying frontage standards, reducing setbacks, limiting lot size minimums. So there's no side setback, no front setback. There's a rear setback. And some of this, it seems kind of drastic, but the thing is, in most cases, a landscaping requirement always applies depending on what's across the street or what kind of road there is. So even if there's no setback in the zone, there's essentially always going to be a setback anyway in terms of landscaping. Not in every case, but in a lot of these cases. And we're providing increased allowances for commercial floor area. So it is a residential zone. So you need to have 51% of the development be residential before you have to go through a conditional use process or a small area implementation plan process. Change that. So again, the idea, the things we're kind of, struggling with here, how do we make development attractive to make it pencil out, as they say, but how do we also ensure that we get a piece, some residential in there too, because that's really what we're focusing on. In the development community, a lot of people like the B3 zone because you can do residential or commercial. And as a result, some of our areas where it'd be great to have more residential because we have transit corridors and pedestrian corridors, they just get built out as commercial when it would be really nice to have some residential there, especially in terms of the plan. And finally, we added some uses, theater company or dinner theater, bar, farmer's market, liquor store, I think is conditional use, pet service, cottage crafts, manufacturing light use, that's really breweries are allowed there, or any small scale kind of industrial stuff that doesn't have a big impact. So to kind of go over some of those things, look at it visually, here's what a potential build out might look like. So the floor to area ratio, it's 3 by right and up to 4 with conditions. And I have a slide that kind of demonstrates what FAR is. Height limit 60 feet without conditions, 90 feet with step backs, no lot coverage requirement, although ultimately, if they still require parking, that's always going to take up a huge amount of the site. There's a maximum setback, but there's no minimum front setback, and there's a rear setback. No lot size minimums. And then another thing we've really been working on is the facade transparency requirements. So that if you're on a street facing wall that faces a pedestrian corridor or a transit corridor, you have to have 30% transparency. If you're facing another type of street, you have to have either an entrance or about 10% transparency or enhanced sidewalk with more landscaping or maybe some building articulation or something like that. So there's sort of a menu available. And just to mention, this is the most recent AMANS plan. We're trying to tie it to this and say, so if you're along any of these corridors, these are the places where we really want to have those windows and create that building that kind of interacts with the street and creates that sort of streetscape, kind of going to the complete streets. If the complete street, connects all the way to the buildings on each side. Just a primer on FAR for people who aren't familiar. I always have to remind myself of what this is. So FAR is floor to area ratio. So if you have a lot that's 100 feet by 100 feet, you can build up to, I've got to move my Zoom here. You can build up to the whole thing if you're allowed one FAR. You can cover the whole lot with building. Or you could leave half of the lot unused and go up to 2 stories. If you have 2 FAR, you can go up to 2 full coverage of the lot, or you can kind of move the blocks around. So really it's sort of a dimensional lot height coverage regulation. So for example, if this was your lot at 3 FAR, you could build 3 stories all the way up the entire lot. At 4 FAR, you could build 4 stories all the way up, covering the entire lot. The thing is, as I mentioned before, there's always going to be probably some landscaping requirements. Most people, because they're going to be required to put in vehicle storage, are going to have to put that in. So these are only looking at FAR, not considering the whole range of other regulations that exist. So why am I talking to you? It's my pleasure to talk to you, of course, because there are these 2 little areas right here that where the comprehensive plan says these areas could potentially be zoned to R4A. They're not R4A right now, but if somebody in the future had one of these properties down here, and there's a line here with Fairview, and they said, hey, I'd like to rezone to R4A. They'd have to go through the normal process. They'd have to go and talk to this council. But according to the plan, they would be eligible to say, I'd like to rezone to R4A. So those lots, looking a little bit more closely, I believe are these 2. So again, this is what the comprehensive plan designates as areas where the community said, or the plan said, that these would be areas suitable for mixed use residential development. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I have a question, Daniel.
Yep.
So the lot that you just showed that was on the right there is a large undeveloped lot between 13th and 14th Cordova and A Street. So if a 90-foot building went onto that lot, that low density, low rise neighborhood to the north would be severely impacted. They'd never see the sun again.
Well, that's something we're looking at now. I mean, yeah, during December, but a building's going to create shadows. The other thing is, though, even a 35-foot building, which is the height allowed even for a single family home right now, even that casts a long shadow in December as well. So I agree. Yeah, you're right. It would create that impact.
And it would even shadow that public park, the Muriel King Park, which is, half a block north of there. I mean, that would be a tremendous change to a residential neighborhood.
It could potentially, if it went up to the 90 feet, which is the absolute max. If it went up to 60, it would also be an impact. And again, all I can say is that's something we're looking at, and ultimately it becomes a trade-off of, is it more important, or maybe you can't even say one thing is more important than the other, but the trade-off really is, do we want to house more people or get more development activity here, or do we want to preserve sunlight for a few months? And again, that's a policy question, right? So that's the kind of input we're taking right now, and that's the thing ultimately that we'll go to Planning and Zoning Commission or to whoever and say, yeah, this could change the feel of this neighborhood, but it's also an area designated by the plan to say this is an area that will probably change in the future. So, right here, these are existing apartments, and I'm sure these apartments also have a similar impact on these houses now. So all I can say is, yeah, there could be shadow impact.
The building that you just pointed to is not a 90-foot building. That's not 90 feet.
No, but again, the zones, it goes to 60 feet and 90 feet with additional conditions about step backs. So the building, as it gets taller, it gets a little bit narrower. So it has less of that shadow casting area.
So why do you think that large vacant lot to the right hasn't been developed?
I don't know.
Are they waiting for R4?
I don't know. And this is R4A, so I don't know if what they're waiting for. I haven't talked to them. We've asked a number of people in the development community, both public and private. I don't think we've heard from anybody who owns this lot.
Do you know who owns it?
I don't know who owns it. I could look it up.
Widener.
Is it
It's
Widener?
Widener.
Okay, well, yeah. And so we wrote Widener and we said, hey, we're putting in this zone and we're asking everybody for feedback, and we didn't hear from them. So again, though, we welcome feedback from everybody.
This is Cheryl. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. Yeah, the Widener developments over there have caused huge controversy. I'm not sure we have anybody representing C Street or east of that, but I believe, isn't this the lot where Widener mined the gravel in order to fill? Okay. Yeah, this is, yeah, hugely controversial, I believe, in South Edition, if the right people who live near there were at the meeting. Sir, do you have a chart or a piece of paper showing the differences between current R4 code or R4A and the next version, the proposed changes to R4A?
No, I didn't, and I meant to I can send out an informational sheet which has those
that would be
a
great.
side-by-side comparison. I'll make sure to send them to the council.
Yeah, that would be real helpful. I think you folks probably remember that we had R4A proposed over near the Pioneer Home just a year ago. And so we're still looking at vacant lots here. I don't see the reason to put in a 90-foot tall building when we haven't even got R3 built up yet. To jump all the way to R4A seemed like a stretch to me, and I'll sign off.
Well, to answer that, we're not proposing any rezones. We're just changing or proposing amendments to a category that already exists. And so if it gets rezoned or not, that's a different situation.
I'm jumping back in like I said I wouldn't. Widener already got a special residential office rezone for their property on C Street itself. Very controversial. They succeeded. The neighborhood objected for years. They got it anyway. If Widener gets a killer rezone there, or not rezone, but a modification that helps their bottom line, There's no reason for them not to go for it. A rezone. I'm trying to quit now. Talking.
I think Tomash has a question.
Yeah, I guess I do have a question. Yes, I don't have to guess that, but I'm just waiting if you're gonna stick with the hand thing. Daniel, thanks for doing this, and thanks for being here, and good to see you. So one question. I'm wondering if you have actually concurrently working on changing the building code, because currently Anchorage is not Seattle. We don't allow what Seattle does. We have 3+1, and I don't think Nuffinger changed that in the past year or two. So I'm pretty sure that we could not build up to that height. What type 5A? I'm talking about type 5A. So if you think of affordable way to build, this current setup with the building code being more limiting than the zoning code. I don't know if you have looked at that concurrent change in the department.
Well, I mean, as you know, the building code is out of our purview. And so maybe that right there addresses some of the concerns that were brought up. I mean, our approach is really like, maybe you're building a box for shoes. You don't want to build the box directly around the shoe. You want to build the box so there's a little bit of flexibility. And you know, the building code, if it sets those heights based on whatever other concerns, that's terrific. But the zoning code, we're just kind of creating a larger kind of a box. And
I understand that Daniel. The point I'm trying to make is that that the current limiting factor to even attempt to build the type of building you're showing on those pictures from, I don't know, Portland, wherever, is that our building code simply, it's a fire issue. We simply have not changed our building code to allow 4+1. We just didn't. And until that happens, you simply don't have the way. This is 5+1 here. So until that happens, you simply don't have any kind of mechanism to even build a building which is affordable, because you have to change systems. So I wonder if it would be wise to actually talk to the building department and propose a concurrent presentation with the land use and the building code to look at this together, because one doesn't work without the other. I mean, you may have it in the land use code, but if you can't do it, then it really doesn't serve a purpose. That's what I was trying to allude to. And as far as I know today, I haven't checked for a while, but I don't think we are planning to change it or have been planning to change it. It's been a limiting factor for a while. It's the current IBC. So maybe that would be a word to ask building official about that.
Okay, thanks for the note. Yep.
Martin has a question, John.
Go ahead, Martin.
Thank you. Daniel, thank you for coming and explaining. It's understanding a little more about this, but this shadow issue is way bigger. I commissioned a shadow study for the proposed Inlet View School building, and in December we get about a shadow from a building is 7 times the building height, and it's still darn big in October, November, February, and January. A big building like that is just going to blight the neighborhood. It may be fine in the lower 48, but it's not good for Anchorage. I think that needs more consideration. Thank you.
Do you have any suggestions for what should be the preference for those solar access? How to weigh it? Should it be who to consider, how far to consider out?
Yeah, Daniel, thank you for asking. And honestly, I don't know how to answer that. I know that if I was on the north side of that building, I would be unhappy. And I see a lot of people there who would be unhappy. And I've never had to really think about this before this winter. What has your department thought about it?
Well, we've been doing study. I mean, we've gotten that comment before. The problem becomes when you're trying to write a clear and objective regulation, that balances one person's property rights with another person's desire for shadow or view or sunlight. And then the other question is, to what extent? For example, do we only look at 1 month between 20 days before December 20th and 20 days after? Do we look at 3 months? Do we look at what the sunlight's like on March 20th and September 20th? And then the other piece is in the existing zoning, in the existing, even in R1, I think a single family home, I don't know if that's R1, at least in R3, I think a single family home can go up to 35 feet. So if it's true that height of the building goes 7 times far back, that's still pretty far as well, but that's allowed currently. In B3 currently, 45 feet is allowed. So that also casts a shadow. So, at the very minimum, we'd probably just say 45 feet, but then we've also heard from people developing like Cook Inlet, and they say, we would really like to be able to build above 45 feet because that would allow us to put in another floor of residential. So ultimately, it really comes down to community values. Honestly, what's more important? Are people willing to sacrifice sunshine for more housing units in their community, or a better mix of residential, commercial, or whatever? And really, that's ultimately what it comes down to is, what is this group willing to give up? What is this group willing to give up? And I don't have an answer. We can interpret and we can try to make that rule, but I can say from our side, it's very difficult to figure out when people say we don't want shadows, to what extent they don't want shadows, and to what extent that can be regulated onto somebody else to say, okay, your building can't do X, Y, and Z, but this building can, or in this situation, or it has to be oriented towards the south or the north. And then the question is, well, what if that meant that no building would happen at all? Okay, maybe that's what some people would want as well, but then are we meeting the plan's goals or what the plan calls for to say, these areas are intended to have this mixed use, more of an urban feel. So even if this can't be developed today, maybe something will change in the future, or some technology will develop where it could be built. So those are kind of the issues we're dealing with. We're accepting all input, welcoming all input. But just to kind of share our side of it is, when you look at these shadow studies, I mean, just at least in SketchUp, it's very hard to create something that results in a meaningful regulation. Because even if you have 2 rows of houses stacked 30, both 35 feet, they still cast a long shadow. And so a building in front of that doesn't cast that much longer of a shadow than those houses behind it. So it's very complex, but at the end, I'll have my email. And I welcome anybody to continue sending these.
This is Cheryl. May I speak?
Yes, go ahead, Cheryl.
I find this discussion very threatening. And I propose, because Tom Davis has done work on this issue for decades and has conducted many shadowing studies, I suggest we bring him in next month to go over shadowing for sure, potentially looking at Inlet View School, and the R2 issue. The R2 is going forward. I still haven't read that work. I'm hoping, Tomasz, you've read it and can report on the R2 status of the changes staff is proposing to the R2 zone. And then third, this R4A, the changes. And hopefully Daniel will send us his sheet that shows us today's rules and tomorrow's rules. And Daniel, I have to thank you because you pointed out these 2 lots have not been rezoned, but they could be based on current thinking. And again, I'll pitch that we aren't even built out to R3, partly because our streets are so unpleasant to live near that developers don't even want to put in R3 there. And if you look at Bootleggers Cove Road, Bootleggers Cove neighborhood area, they are built out to a large extent. And so we have more to do in the urban core of making our neighborhoods pleasant enough to build up 3 stories to R3. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
I think I'd like to provide a little bit of maybe balance to this. We are still in the process of finalizing our neighborhood plan. And one of the things that's really important to us is our neighborhood character in South Addition, and Northern Design Standards and solar access. I will say, from my personal perspective, I think that there are a lot of my peers who would like to live in a building like this, where there's either affordable housing or market rate housing above amenities like a grocery store or a coffee shop or a brewery or what have you. And the reality is that we do need denser housing in Anchorage. And if we're going to grow as a city and we want to see revitalization of the urban core, we may need to identify pinpoint places like this. And everything that we're talking about, for me, there can be a synergy between safe, walkable streets, climate change and energy efficiency, and denser housing. And so I think we have to take in multiple considerations. I know there is a growing appetite in Fairview for development, definitely in the Our Downtown plan, to replace some of these wide areas that are just, underutilized parking lots now to build up and create more housing. And I personally would like to see more opportunities for mixed use, to see entrepreneurs and small businesses be able to get their start in the urban core. So that's just my personal perspective, but I also have a lot of respect for the history that folks like John and Cheryl are bringing into this conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniel.
And I think Anna has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Anna.
Thank you. I had just a quick clarification. You had the map up at the beginning, Daniel, from the city that showed where the proposed changes impact South Addition, and it's just that, yeah, it's just those little blocks. Do we know who lives on in those areas? Like, can we invite them to give their thoughts? That's one comment. And then the other, to make a pointed effort to reach out to them, because it sounds like we've made efforts to reach out to developers. And then the other, I don't know how, a true mixed neighborhood would have a little bit of this and then keep the character, and then, maybe enhance something, give the neighborhood something that they've always also wanted. And I know that Anchorage doesn't do this, but, other cities, when there's a development coming through, they also upgrade everything in the block, to a certain degree. So, because you are bringing in more users to the neighborhood, more traffic, and perhaps, a shadow issue, you're going to then, improve the streetscape, improve, the amenities, the landscaping, all of that stuff too. So, that's kind of my personal thing. If you're gonna, if it's gonna happen, there needs to be a carrot in there for the neighborhood.
Those are all things we've talked about. And one thing I will say is that a land use itself doesn't create traffic. Drivers create traffic, or people create pedestrian traffic. And it often correlates, but I would say, if just because an apartment building is being built doesn't mean that drivers will materialize. If you build a lot of parking and everything around is accessible by car, then probably they will. But I always kind of, highlight that it's not the building itself that's causing traffic, it's drivers. It's people who drive, who choose to go there. And in terms of getting something out of them, we've talked about that too. And there's a lot of that in there right now in the existing R4 with the bonuses. So it says, if you provide informational kiosk, or if you upgrade the sidewalk, or you put in this patterned text concrete. And one discussion we've been having with that is, when you're doing that, it almost becomes that you're zoning on a pretext. So for people, especially in the neighborhood, if they look at the zone and they say, okay, I can expect, let's say 60 feet, let's say 90 feet. Okay, say it was just 90 feet. But then if there are these pieces in there where they say, but if you improve the neighborhood and you do this and that, then you can get up to 120 feet. That can sometimes really destabilize the neighborhood because people have an expectation that zoning means this. But if you add in these bonuses, all of a sudden zoning becomes this sort of horse trade where it's less transparent and people don't know what to expect. So with this one, we were trying to push back. And I'm not saying, you know, don't put those things in, but I would say, if you want it, put it in and require it from everybody every single time, just so that everybody knows exactly what to expect. Traditionally, there's been this kind of, oh, we'll put in some bonuses and we'll hope that if we can give away this, we can get that. And that leads to this sort of pretextual situation. So again, I'm not saying one way or another, let's do that, let's not do that. But I'm saying, I'm recommending if we do put those things in, we apply them to every single development equally. So it's always clear. So anybody looking at the zone knows that it means this, 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 and this. And there's nothing else, nothing unexpected. So thanks for the comment.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in one more quick one, John, and that's more of a follow-up on what could be, I guess, helpful for you, Daniel. And I think one thing it would be is that as this update is about the zoning, which is R4A, and it's about its pieces or its conditions and its current status. But what you just heard is basically the concern of how that relates to land use and location, not land use, actual properties and location of those properties. Because as you probably noticed, no one mentioned that if any of those buildings would be introduced in the downtown area, then everybody would be very much in welcoming mode, because that seems or feels more appropriate from a neighborhood perspective. And I think there needs to be a discussion on how you present this project and how do you couple it or decouple it with potential areas where this happens or can happen. And I would advise against just like brushing aside downtown because they're working on the comp plan. I mean, if anywhere Anchorage can use an urban type of development is actually the urban core. We should advocate for that. And I think with your work at the department could perhaps resonate with the leadership there, that these cannot be successful initiatives in a vacuum. They have to work together. And I think Anna's comment about updates for infrastructure and streets while development happens, that's a big issue with Anchorage, because we don't focus the money to development. There is no public money paired with private money doing it at the same time. And that's a very big miss in my view. And I think that could be improved. But that doesn't really fix whether the step backs or the heights or any of those things which you're asking about are welcomed or not, because those are actually pretty reasonable. But you already stated that it would be probably better to not have a bonus system, set the zoning rules for now, work what the pressure is on those properties, and realize that the pressure is actually not very high. And one of the reasons why that is because of the building code, as I mentioned. It simply is not feasible to build these buildings until that changes. Losing one story of type 5A is like a deal killer, because you know your 4 FAR just goes to 3 FARs. It's just like you lost a 25% of your volume which you could build. That's a big deal, and it's not a land use issue necessarily. So anyway, I didn't want to belabor this, but I wanted to make sure that I say it before I sign off. Thank you.
Yeah, just to answer that, Tomasz, I just want to emphasize that the R4A was specifically called out in the 2040 land use plan, which I think was published in 2016. So this area right here, this was identified in 2016 as an area where people wanted mixed use. And the R4A, as it is today, you can build up to 45 feet and up to maybe 65 or even higher if you get some of those bonuses. So
correct. That's not what I'm disputing. No.
Yeah. And Tomasz, you always point out things that Tomasz and I work on the Watershed Commission. He's kind of like the resident sage, you know, he's always he's got very good insight. So I really appreciate your comments, but I'm just adding for everybody else that as conditions are, a lot of this is already possible, but nobody is doing it, which suggests that maybe the problem's solved itself, or as Tomasz points out, there are other issues. So anyway, it might all be moot. So thank you.
I want to say one other thing. At Muriel King Park is right up there, as John pointed out, and I think one of the issues that we've discussed, and that we passed a resolution regarding that park, was that there's not enough positive activity going on, and not enough positive usage of the park. And so we need to potentially reimagine how that park is used. That's one of the things that we requested in our CAPSIS request. Maybe that there needs to be upgrades to the park. But I think if you had more folks living in that area, they may be using that park more. It may be a more active space, more activated space, and that potentially could deter negative usage. So that's something to consider.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments? Well, thank you, Daniel, very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Here's my information. Please send any comments our way if you have them, or call or email or write cards and letters. Thank you for having me. I appreciate all your comments. I've taken notes here, and we'll continue working on this. So thank you very much.
And the next thing on our agenda is Megan Moffett from the Anchorage Equal Rights Commission. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan. I'm an investigator with the Anchorage Equal Rights Commission, or AERC. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I realize I seem to be the grand finale, so I'll try to be very succinct. I basically just very briefly want to share the purpose of the Anchorage Equal Rights Commission and the resources we offer to the community. Let's see, are you able to see my screen? It says AERC.
We can see it. Yep.
So basically, we're a municipal law enforcement agency located in City Hall, and we impartially investigate discrimination complaints with the goal of preventing and eliminating discrimination in our community. Our jurisdiction and our process are determined by Title V of the Anchorage Municipal Code, and essentially we want to be available as a resource to anyone in the muni from Girdwood to Eagle River who feels they're experiencing discrimination or wants to learn more information about anti-discrimination law. And as a very simple explanation, to discriminate against someone means to treat that person differently or less favorably based on an aspect of their identity. And in Anchorage, it is illegal to discriminate against someone based on these protected classes that I listed here. I won't read through all of them, but a couple that we like to point out just for clarity. National origin refers to the place where someone was born or comes from. And then mental or physical disability refers to anything that inhibits a person from participating in everyday life activities. So that could be as wide-ranging as walking, talking, concentrating. So that definition of disability is often a little bit wider than many people might anticipate or realize. The AERC has jurisdiction to enforce anti-discrimination law in employment, housing, financial services, public services, schools, or public accommodations. And that means anything that's open to the general public. So like a restaurant or a hotel, anything that anyone could easily walk into during business hours. And we include this slide just to emphasize that employment is probably where we get the most inquiries from, and often like termination is what is most on people's minds, but it can also occur just in someone's everyday workday in a variety of ways, such as like who is decided to be promoted, who receives those pay bumps, that kind of thing. So it's just a wider array than might again be anticipated. When should someone call the AERC? If anyone ever wants to discuss a situation, please just give us a call. Our services are free and confidential, and if it's within our jurisdiction, we'll help that person draft a complaint and walk them through our process. If the issue is not in our jurisdiction, then we will do our best to provide a relevant referral and then hopefully that can better assist with the situation. Some questions that to ask if you or a loved one feel like you might need to call the AERC are listed here. For example, do you feel you were treated differently than someone else in a similar situation? Do you feel like your protected class was a motivating factor in the issue that you're experiencing? Do you feel that the decision affected you differently than other people? Or do you feel you were treated differently after you expressed a discrimination concern, whether about yourself or somebody else? And we're extremely available. You can walk into our office in City Hall. We're on the first floor. We're also available by phone, email. And then we also have an intake form on our website for people who would rather kind of plot out in writing what they're experiencing. And yeah, I'll just skip through our process, but basically we're also able to provide anti-discrimination law trainings to community groups. We specialize those depending on the interest area. I could talk for hours about all sorts of things. So if they're interested, we're more than happy to coordinate with those groups. We also have openings on our municipal commission, which is our board that kind of helps direct our work in some ways. So if anyone is interested in applying and supporting our mission, I would encourage you to reach out to me. And that's about it. We just kind of are reaching out to community councils to let them know we're here. Does anybody have any questions for me?
This is Cheryl, and I do.
Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate the existence of your commission. And also, I have to say, I'm pretty proud of Anchorage. I think we do a pretty good job with all of our different cultures and races and people getting along together. That's my view of my town, and I know there are exceptions, but that's my prevalent view. At the same time, I have tried to understand in recent years how many complaints come into the Equal Rights Commission and how they're categorized. And I was not able to find if complaints coming into you are categorized by race.
Yeah, so on our website, we have our annual reports from, I believe, at least the last decade, and that shows some statistics on the types of complaints that we receive year to year. I would say, generally speaking, that the complaints we receive more frequently are on the basis of race, gender, and disability. I don't have specific numbers for you, but I would say that that is a theme of our office. And I also want to add that I agree with you. I think we have a really welcoming community. I'm not from Alaska, and part of the reason that I keep choosing to stay here is because, you know, I think this is a really wonderful community and a very welcoming aspect to it, that people are very willing to help each other, but we just want to have that avenue for when things aren't quite right, that someone has a recourse that hopefully we can step in and help.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to be a little more specific with my question. Do you categorize complaints that come in by the race of the person who is affected? Who is complaining? A white person, a Black person, a Native person? Do you categorize in that way?
So when someone files a complaint, they establish that they're part of the protected class. And when they do that, they do establish, for example, you know, if I'm filing on race, I would say, this is what happened. I'm white. That is my protected class that I'm filing under. In terms of our published statistics, I don't know that we have that. I would say in our reporting process with the EEOC, we do categorize. But I don't know if that is something that we internally report on. But I suppose it is a statistic that we do keep, even if we don't report on it or don't generate that report specifically for that purpose. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, we're circling around it. Did I understand that if I go to EEOC, I might find that number from Anchorage?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm not sure if the EEOC would. I'm happy to put my contact information. I don't have a, and then we can follow up about this if there's, if you're looking for like a specific chart. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And thank you for your work.
Thank you. Anything else?
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Megan?
John, Christopher here.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Christopher.
Thank you, Megan. Just know that at our assembly meeting next week, there is somebody who signed up for the public people to be heard that wants to talk about Title V. And so you might want to tune into that meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for the heads up.
I think it's about vaccine status or something.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Constant, would you like to give a presentation this evening?
Sure, I'll give my report. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm late. We had a special assembly meeting tonight where we had the first public hearing for the reapportionment plan moving forward. And so the first thing I will say, and I'll put it in the chat, is if you want to see the draft maps, go to www.reapportionanc.org. It's in the chat. And there you, right in the kind of middle bottom of the page, it says view maps. You click on the online viewer, you can see the PDFs, they're listed. So there should be 4 of them there, but in the viewer, there's 3. So those are 3 of the maps being considered. And then you go into the archive, map number 12 is also being considered. And that one may be moved into the main viewer after a meeting tomorrow. But tomorrow we have a work session. We had about maybe half a dozen people testify tonight in the public hearing on the maps as proposed. With the maps that we have, the public comments that are coming in, there's lots of comments coming in. They're tending to support the map that's called Weddleton version 2, which is map 11. And so what I'm seeing the most support for out in the community is map 11. So I would recommend you look at that map and see what it does. What's important about this for us in our neighborhood is that once this map is finalized, the item is adopted, then triggers the special election countdown for the 12th member of the assembly, where our neighborhood gets finally its second representative for the first time in 40 some years. And so this is a very important process for all of us. And I've been driving really hard to get this done in a manner that's timely, but not sacrificing public input. We've had work sessions, town halls, committee meetings, hearings. We'll have 2 public hearings, one that was tonight, one that's coming, and coming up on the 1st. And then we may have a 3rd public hearing just because there's been some expression of interest in that. It's likely to be either on March the 8th or March the 22nd. It won't probably be on the 15th because I've been working on this project for 7 years and just not going to be, I'm out of town on the 15th at a conference in DC and don't want to miss the vote on this project that I've been working on to craft this 12th member. And so it's 8th to the 22nd or the 1st. And so it's going to land here pretty soon. That said, the number of things are happening. There's lots of good progress on the homeless demobilization of the mass shelter. I anticipate we'll hear some announcements of project site locations that are kicking off and probably going to come online here pretty soon, next month or 2, which is very good and exciting and demonstration of our ability to work together with the new administration, who's, I think, in some ways getting their feet under them in a way that they haven't had before. I'm grateful that Larry Baker and Cheryl Frasca are now on the negotiating team for the homeless services. And there's just been a number of projects moving forward, lots of good things happening at the Muni. Election is coming, ballots are going to be mailed in about a month. The election closes, I believe, on April the 6th. The new maps will not be in effect for this election. So this election is under the old maps and old plans, but we don't have a member up in this plan map period because we didn't have a second member. So, but there are plenty of bonds and other important issues going on. And other than that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Inquiring minds want to know when that special election is going to be.
It will be no longer than 90 days after the declaration of an election. So the charter states that a vacancy in the assembly must be filled within 90 days. And so the day that I feel like it should have been 90 days from November 10th when the state published their final plan maps when Proposition 12 went into effect. But you have to have a map to have an election by. So the day the maps are adopted, within 90 days of that day. That's my plan. I have yet to finalize the draft resolution declaring the vacancy. That will happen probably the next vote after the adoption of the maps. So that's the operating plan at this time. So it's the same time frame still. We're within kind of the summer, early summer, when we're looking at that happening. So that's the best answer I have.
This is Cheryl. May I speak?
Please.
Yes, go ahead, Cheryl.
Christopher, I owe you a deep gratitude for the baloney you've been putting up with for the last several months. And I know my neighbors feel the same way. So I just wanted to, I should have called you or emailed, but I'm thanking you tonight for all the grief you're putting up with and doing a hell of a job representing your constituents. So
Thank you, Cheryl. You
thank
know, it has been the most interesting time of my life so far. Some of the things that I have witnessed in the last 2 years, I never imagined I would witness in my life. And yet still what is that? And still we got to keep going. And so there's still work to be done.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. Christopher, I'm going to ask you a technical question. I understand that map 11 is John Weddleton's. What is map 12 and what's their relationship in your mind? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so any member of the assembly can make an amendment proposal, can propose an amendment or propose a substitute version of any item that comes before the body at any time, right? All they need is a second to get it on the table, as long as it's proper in order and recognized by the chair and all of those things. And so a member from Eagle River moved a map, proposed a map, and so we have a committee process that's working. There are 6 members on the committee, 1 member from each district. So there's very broad representation on the committee. And the committee's been working a very thorough process to make sure that it's very open and public and transparent. And so the committee went through all, I think, 15 maps that were eventually or ultimately submitted. And this all started with, we hired a contractor. The contractor developed 4 maps. And then we told the public, you have until January 20th to submit maps if you want to propose your own maps. And something amazing happened. Like, we had 8 maps submitted that were from members of the public, right? The maps, in fact, that we moved forward with, the final 3, were all developed by members of the community, not by the contractor. So the public process has been incredible, in my opinion, how it's worked, because the final map that gets adopted will be ultimately and primarily drafted by a member of the public who said, I'm just going to try to do this, and did it, and was successful, which is quite amazing. But Weddleton, the map 12 or 11, he worked with one of the people who submitted a map to submit his own version of a map. So that's one of the maps. So, but the committee moved forward 3 maps. And then 1 member from Eagle River decided they wanted to move forward a map that the committee said no to. So the committee voted 1 to 5 not to forward that map. So the member brought it forward anyways in the form of a substitute version. And so that map is in the archive section until we meet tomorrow, when the committee can authorize it being moved into the main section. But that map is drafted by a member from Eagle River and with the mayor's team. And so, and it is not a map that I support. It does some very interesting things with boundaries, divides Northern Lights, north and south, creating a divide between West Anchorage, which I don't think makes a lot of sense, but that's okay. Please look at the maps and give me your thoughts. I am very open to hearing from members of the public. But again, most comments have come in on Weddleton map 11 being the one that makes the most sense. So that's the one at this time I'm leaning towards. And it was a surprise because it came in late as well, and it too was rejected. But then the committee reviewed both of the maps that were rejected that were late, and it did in fact consider Weddleton's and moved it forward. It took the other one and said no. And so it's kind of amazing how the process has worked.
Okay, and I'm sorry to repeat, but I'm confused about map 12. What is map 12?
Okay, so are you in the viewer by chance? Can you open that up on your browser? I could share if I could have control. Let's see. Let me take control here and I'll share. So, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
So let me open the browser. Get it there. Let's see now. Let's try this again. Okay, can you see it? So here we go. This is reapportion and C forwards you to this municipal webpage. When you scroll down, you go to their options, timeline to participate, reapportionment fact sheet, and here in the middle is reapportionment maps. This pops open and you see these are all the maps that were submitted. Okay, and so the maps that the committee approved to move forward are map 6, 7, and 11. Member Allard moved forward map 12 that's down here. So, but these are just PDFs, they're flat files. So if you go into this link right here, the online map viewer, it's very fun. You can actually open the map viewer and then you can look at 3 of the 4 maps. And so this is map 6 version 2, which is the first map we'll consider. And I don't know if this is coming through, but it does some interesting things with our district. It drives our district essentially down to Tudor Road. This pink red is our district. The old boundary is here, and our district pushes down into Spinard and onto 36th and takes much of Rogers Park and then kind of weaves over here. So that's the nature of our district, expands into East Anchorage. Our district has to expand, it grows by double, which means all the other districts have to give up some. And the mean that we're aiming for, the target is 48,541 residents. If we were in an ideal situation and the computer did it, it could get pretty close to that. But a computer doesn't take into consideration compactness, contiguity, and communities of interest. These things we also have to respect. And so communities of interest are a very interesting thing and what are in the end going to make the subtle differences of the maps. So this is map 6, this is map 7. And map 7 does a similar thing. It pushes us down to Spinard, runs us up into Airport Heights and very deep into East Anchorage. It repatriates much of this section here that was kept in Eagle River and forever. It puts a part of our district onto J-Bear on the Elmendorf side, and it changes the boundaries of Midtown in these ways. And it actually joins a portion of Hillside to Eagle River. This has been the most contentious map in either of the maps. So the first one was really terrible because it joined Eagle River with Girdwood. Imagine having to drive to Girdwood from Eagle River for a community council meeting. It's just not feasible. The argument that going from Hillside to Eagle River is not that big of a stretch to me, because if we're being honest, they're supposedly representing J-Bear as well. And the difference in time between this point on the map and this point on the map is approximately 7 minutes. And there's an argument to be said, what do these neighborhoods share in common? They share demographics. They're similar in race and ethnic backgrounds. They're similar in economic strata. In fact, they have large lot configurations, meaning larger than an acre. They are not on city water or sewer. They're on wells and septics, excuse me. They also are on limited road service areas instead of in ARDSA. And in fact, I know a member from Eagle River missed the meeting that we were having because their kids were skiing at Hillside. And so there are a lot of arguments why they're similar and it would be fair. They are certainly contiguous, but it's not practical to go from here to there. So probably this map doesn't fly, and that's probably okay. The map that's gotten the most public support is this one so far, but there's still another public hearing. So please, if you have an opinion, let us know. And what this map does is it pushes us again slightly down towards Spinard and 36th, but I think this section will likely change. There's a proposal afoot to make the decisions based on school boundaries in some ways, because schools really do define communities, places where kids play together. And if that happens, this map changes slightly because this section will remain in East Anchorage because East High is right here. And this section will have to remain in West Anchorage because West Anchorage High is right there, which Central Middle School is here. And this whole area to this line is part of the Central Middle, not Central, Clark Middle School feeder district. And so anyhow, so this is the map that's very likely to move forward because all of the public support that's been coming in. And then map 12, which gets to your question, Cheryl. I'm sorry it took me so long to actually get to the point. Map 12 is in the viewer, but it's in the archive until tomorrow, where it may change over to the main map. And what this map does is in some ways, it seems rational. It definitely keeps J-Bear and Eagle River. It gives back this section to East Anchorage, which this population is very much like this population, not at all like that population. But then it actually does some interesting gerrymander things, like this Turnagain neighborhood. This is all one neighborhood. This is a community of interest. And so it doesn't make any sense to me that you would draw that line, but it does very interesting political things, or even this little section doesn't make any sense to be pulling that into East Anchorage. So, but this map too will be considered, and we'll see what happens. So that's map 12. Those are the 4 maps. Any member can make an amendment or propose a substitute version, and tomorrow we will make some decisions on how we're going to move forward to the last step, including final dates and times, methods for submitting amendments, etc. And so all of that to summarize, when those maps or that final map is adopted, we're off to the races and we're getting a second member within 90 days.
Emma, do you have a question? You're on mute.
Yeah, my questions or comments were not necessarily related to this, so I don't want to overstep
I think I killed that item. We've done it. So next question.
I attended a couple different meetings related to the APD body camera policy. And so I just wanted to maybe hear from you your current thoughts on, hold on, sweetie, I'm talking.
I'm going potty.
Okay.
And my children for endless stuff.
Great. So what are your thoughts on the APD body camera draft policy?
So the assembly is like you reviewing the policy in real time. And I think that there are some concerns that the policy is overly protective of the police department and their process, and not overly sherifful. But there are many difficult things in the process that have to be sorted out. I mean, like, some people would like to have all records all the time and make them discoverable. And it's like, what happens when the officers go into the bathroom, right? And so there are just some simple tactical questions that are well suited for conversations about privacy in our Constitution and its very strong right to privacy. And then the real hurdle is the next step, not what we have now, but the next step, which is the bargaining units and working the process through the negotiated bargaining units. And so we're still working to figure out what the proper balance is. And so I have only a squishy answer for you for this, because we're not at a point where it's concrete. I know we keep hearing statements like this is the last version, but it's just not the last version. That's not how these processes work. And in fact, the policies will be updated forever. And so no policy is static. That's why it's a policy and not a law. And even the laws aren't static. And so I understand the concerns, and I voted yes for this special tax to create it. And I want to get them on the ground as soon as we can. But I'm still watching the process, and it is what it is. So I wish I had a better answer.
I will just, that's great. I appreciate that, update on it. And I would say that the meetings have not been very open to the public in terms of time of day, have been working hours. They have limited the ability to comment and share video. So I have some questions about the open meetings, truly being open meetings. And so it sounds like this apportionment, discussion has been very robust in lots of, town halls, and, so I would assume that the same should be applied to this very important, thing that taxpayers have said they want.
So to that point, the police department is managing, the administration is responsible for development of policy, and the assembly is responsible for the development of the robust planning map process. And in particular, I am, because I'm the chair. And so you can see the flavor by which I approach these issues. I want to have it out on the table, and I'm very glad we have. I can take your feedback back to the committee. I missed the meeting last week because a very important and critical meeting came up on homelessness that I couldn't miss. And so myself and Ms. Zalatel had to go to this meeting to help land the projects that we're trying to get people off the streets and out of the shelter. So I apologize for missing that and not being there, but I will ensure that the committee leadership understands that what I hear really is it would be wise to have at least another meeting that's in the evening at a time when the public can get there, and that's maybe in person, not online, so that people can give their testimony without hindrance. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, then I will carry that message back. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any more questions for Assemblyman Constant?
So I'll make one last comment, and that is just my prayers go out to Ukraine, where I have friends, and I hope for a good resolution there.
Yes. We now can go on to community comments. So anyone who would like to speak has 3 minutes. Well, seeing none, we can Go ahead, Martin. Martin, you're on mute.
I think I unmuted. Thank you. Thank you, John. At our last meeting, Brad Coy, I said, hey, I'd like to continue the conversation with you when I asked him to look at the crossings, the street crossings at 13th and L. And by golly, he showed up. He had a great interchange. He came Thursday afternoon, February 3rd, in the middle of a snowstorm and wind, and we just sat and watched cars and pedestrians at 3:30 in the afternoon go through the intersection. And he really showed professional interest, asked me questions, some of which I could answer, and some of which I honestly said I couldn't answer. And he saw how the traffic leaves 13th and merges onto L. So this is a shout out. This is saying he's serious, and we're lucky that we've got his interest.
Can I jump in there, John, real quick? Can I jump in there?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a meeting with them today and it was very interesting. And you might be interested in this information. There is a moving proposal to create urban, what do they call them? Safe traffic zones. So I'll send forward to the chair the PowerPoint presentation that I received today. But out on the highways, out towards Girdwood, where you have a safety zone, that's the term. Safety zones are limited by law to rural areas. But Brad Coy and the state DOT folks brought forward a proposal to allow us to create safety zones in town, which would allow us to strategically reduce traffic speeds in key high pedestrian areas and increase fines and create a much more safe pedestrian environment. And so thank you, Martin, for sparking that. And I'll make sure to get that to the president.
This is Cheryl. Can I slip in?
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Christopher, there's a team of us have been working very hard for the last month or so to nominate AC, INL, and 15th as complete streets, which would accomplish that. And so we clearly need to communicate with our assembly rep as to what we've been up to here. And we will do that. So that's quite fascinating. Yeah, it points out the need for us to do some decent outreach. But also, John and Daniel, I have to thank you for this meeting because it's the first time in a long while I felt like people were free to talk about things. I felt some of our previous meetings have been rushed and limited our discussion as a community, even within that 2-hour time frame. So I thank you very much for the pace of this meeting and for the depth of the discussions we've had here. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments? Go ahead, Martin.
I wanted to agree with Cheryl and Christopher. Thank you for all the hard work you're putting on issues that are really important to us in Anchorage and in the South Edition. And also, Cheryl's right. This has been a really good meeting. A lot of interesting and important discussion. Then now I'll remute.
No
Thank
one
you,
else?
everybody. John, I don't see any more hands, so I might make a motion to adjourn.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
I think the ayes have it.
The ayes have it.
Thank
See
you,
you next
everybody.
Thank you.